In 2001, Julia Roberts won an Academy Award for portraying Erin Brockovich, a real-life legal clerk turned whistleblower against major utility company Pacific Gas and Electric for the groundwater contamination in the town of Hinckley, California. The real-life lawsuit was settled in 1996 for $333 million, the largest settlement ever paid in a direct action lawsuit in US history at that time. One of the lawyers who was involved in winning the settlement was Thomas Vincent Girardi. He was even credited as an advisor on the film. He was already famous in legal circles, but the historic settlement and subsequent movie catapulted him to rock star status. The publicity landed him more cases, more wins, and ultimately, more power. And with his much younger pop star wife by his side, Tom Girardi ruled Los Angeles. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Tom Girardi began his career as a personal injury lawyer in the 1960s, working on small cases like dog bites and slip and falls. But in 1970, he made history when he became the first attorney in California to win a medical malpractice judgment over $1 million. He crafted a David vs. Goliath brand for himself. He represented everyday people and went up against some of the biggest corporations in the country. His firm, Girardi Keese, operated on what's known as contingency cases. Essentially, their clients don't pay them at all. They would just collect 25 to 40% of the money they won in the lawsuit. They worked on many high-profile and historic cases. In the 80s, Girardi Keese represented 624 Lockheed aircraft workers and sued several major chemical companies for knowingly exposing the workers to hazardous materials, causing them to get cancer and other illnesses. The many trials culminated in a 1998 verdict of almost $800 million. In 2007, Tom represented over 800 cases against pharmaceutical giant Merck & Co. for medical complications related to the painkiller Vioxx, and secured a $4.85 billion settlement, one of the largest drug settlements ever. It would be the first of 3 judgments over $1 billion that he'd win in his career. 40% of $1 billion, by the way, is $400 million. And of course, the Oscar-winning Erin Brockovich movie became the best advertisement any law firm could hope for. Tom Girardi became one of the most respected lawyers in the United States. Companies would settle with him based on his reputation alone. He received a plethora of accolades and awards and was inducted into several legal associations' halls of fame. In 2018, the International Association of Top Professionals awarded him Lawyer of the Decade. In 2005, he became the first trial lawyer to be appointed to the California Judicial Council, the policymaking body of the state courts. He was a member of several prestigious legal organizations, had regular features in pretty much every legal magazine, and was constantly voted Top Attorney of the Year, Top 100 Lawyers in California, or Best Lawyers in America by various institutions multiple years in a row. In short, he was a massive deal in the legal world. He amassed a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of his 40-year career. Tom came to wield an incredible amount of power in LA too. He had many friends in high places. Judges, politicians, law enforcement, and other attorneys all wanted to curry favor with him. His holiday and Super Bowl parties were the hottest tickets in town and were attended by California's elite. He made a total of $7.5 million in political contributions over the years. He was close personal friends with quite a few American presidents and presidential candidates. You may be imagining him as some aggressive bulldog of a trial lawyer, but Tom was surprisingly the opposite. He was soft-spoken, always had a smile on his face, and came across as just some harmless old man. He marketed himself as a champion for the little guy, but the themes of this story are duplicity, alter egos, and performance. And Tom was anything but harmless.
Being broke sucks and being rich is a lot better.
In 1997, Tom became an investor in the reboot of Chasen's restaurant in Beverly Hills. The original Chasen's was his favorite restaurant. In its heyday, the famous LA institution used to be frequented by Hollywood stars like Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, Clark Gable, Elizabeth Taylor, and Marilyn Monroe. One day when Tom was dining at the restaurant, he met 27-year-old cocktail waitress Erika Jayne. They had an instant connection despite the 33-year age difference. Over the next year, Tom wooed Erika and showered her with lavish gifts, including a pair of $800,000 diamond earrings. Erika had always wanted to be a star. When she turned 18, she left her hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, and moved to New York City to pursue a career in entertainment. She worked as a waitress and a dancer in the city's clubs for several years, then moved to Los Angeles in 1996. By the time she met Tom Girardi, she was divorced with a young son who was also named Tom. In January 2000, Erika became Tom's third wife in a spontaneous wedding ceremony at the Los Angeles Country Club. Her waitressing days were over, and for the next 7 years, she would live a life of luxury as the First Lady of LA Law. In 2007, Erika decided she wanted to pursue her dream of being an entertainer again. She created an alter ego, Erika Jayne, a bold, ultra-confident, sexy version of herself. Her husband fully supported her new venture and bankrolled her pop star career. He was so supportive that at the 2011 Italian-American Lawyers Association annual Supreme Court night, Tom, the association's president, screened a raunchy Erika Jayne music video for the ballroom full of attorneys and judges. The Gerardis hired all the best people in the music industry to jumpstart her career. Erika's music was moderately successful, but certainly wasn't making a return on investment. In 2015, a turning point came for the couple when Erika was cast in the reality show The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Like many of her castmates, she wasn't at all shy about flaunting her extreme wealth for viewers. She showed off the 75,000 square foot Pasadena compound she shared with Tom, her enormous wardrobe full of designer clothes and accessories, casually mentioned that they had 2 private planes, and bragged about the millions of dollars worth of art and jewelry that her husband frequently gifted her. Erika detailed how the cost of her choreographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, and costume designers totaled $40,000 a month. She was unbothered by accusations of being a gold digger, and during this time, released songs like How Many Fucks, Expensive, and Cars. All of them were about how rich she is. Tom made a few appearances on the show too. As always, he was charming and effortlessly commanded respect from the rest of the cast. In one scene, he and Erika are out having lunch when the LAPD chief of police, Charlie Beck, happens to show up and gives them both big hugs. Obviously, it was no coincidence. The scene was most likely staged to show how powerful and connected the Girardis were. Over the next few seasons of the show, Erika and Tom were both portrayed in a generally positive light. I would hazard a guess that the parent company of the Real Housewives franchise, NBC Universal, probably wanted to stay in Tom's good graces. And so he was shown as a highly intelligent, gentle and supportive husband who generously funded Erika's glamorous lifestyle. But I think we all know that reality TV doesn't always reflect true reality. While Erika was becoming a fan favorite and basking in the newfound fame she had craved all her life, her husband was not only in major financial trouble, but he had also crossed a serious ethical line in order to keep up appearances. One key thing to know is that it is strictly off limits for a lawyer to ever touch a client's money. After legal fees are taken out, the funds from a trial or settlement are meant to go into the client's trust account, regulated by the state bar, and must stay separate from the lawyer's account. The lawyer is also expected to provide the client with a full, transparent accounting of all funds. Failure to do so usually results in disbarment and sometimes even prison time, for most lawyers at least. By early 2020, Tom Girardi had completely lost control of his law firm's finances, but he had done a very good job of keeping his problems out of news headlines. It all started in September 2010. 19-year-old Joseph Ruigomez and his girlfriend Jessica were spending the afternoon watching TV in their home in San Bruno, California. They heard a loud rumbling coming from the floor. Then suddenly, the entire house was swallowed by flames. There had been a leak in a gas pipe owned by Pacific Gas and Electric, the same company that was sued in the Erin Brockovich case, and the explosion destroyed several homes in the area. 90% of Joe's body was burned as well as his lungs. Jessica, along with 7 other neighbors, were killed. At the hospital, while Joe was in a coma, dozens of lawyers bombarded his mum, Kathy, wanting to represent them. However, Kathy's best friend, Kim Archie, was a paralegal and suggested they go with Tom Girardi and got them a meeting. When Joe eventually woke up from his coma, Tom promised him and his mum that he'd take care of everything on the legal side of things. A few months after the explosion, Tom reached a settlement with PG&E. The amount was kept confidential, but both Joe and his mum were very happy with the number. Joe would have to undergo surgeries and other medical procedures for the rest of his life as a result of his burns, so it was important that the settlement would be enough to cover everything. Instead of transferring the settlement money into Joe's account, Tom offered to manage the money for him and suggested they put it into one of his high-interest accounts. He guaranteed there would be no loss. The Ruigomez family trusted Tom, and since he was a successful multimillionaire himself, they agreed to let him invest their money. However, Tom frequently missed the scheduled payments he was supposed to make to Joe. The Ruigomez family chased Tom for the money for years, but he had endless excuses as to why he didn't have the money. He failed to send them statements, blamed the judge as a scapegoat, then would play the nice guy by calling them his favorite family. As time went on, it became harder and harder to get in contact with him at all. By 2017, Joe had all but given up on trying to get his money. He didn't know who to report the matter to. Tom Girardi was friends with all the cops and judges, and other lawyers were scared of him. Kim Archie, the family friend of the Ruigomezes, had actually ended up working with Tom as a legal consultant. She was excited to get to work closely with this legal legend. She got more than she bargained for. She was able to get an idea of the kind of money Tom was actually making from settlements. And to her, it didn't quite add up with his extravagant lifestyle full of luxury cars, private jets, diamonds, and the latest designer clothing. She couldn't help but wonder if he and Erika were living a bit beyond their means. She sensed there was something shady going on with settlement funds. In 2014, 28 of Tom's former clients sued him for misappropriating their settlement money. A couple of years ago, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer was hit with multiple lawsuits related to the hormone drug Prempo that caused women to develop breast cancer and had to pay out over $1 billion to settle all the suits. Tom Girardi represented 138 cancer survivors and won a total settlement of $17 million. But 28 of his clients never received their share of the money. Tom was ordered by a federal magistrate to hand over bank records and other documents, but he refused these requests, claiming it was a breach of privacy. Lawyers representing the 28 women argued that it wasn't a breach of privacy, as he had, quote, voluntarily made his wealth a matter of public interest by appearing on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and suggested that the records would, quote, reveal the fraudulent and criminal nature of the firm's wrongdoing. Tom was able to settle the case before it went to trial by secretly taking out 2 high-interest loans totaling $17 million from lenders that specialized in funding law firms. It wasn't the first time, nor would it be the last time, Tom would need to take out substantial loans. In fact, there was a long line of creditors demanding tens of millions of dollars from him. Lenders, third-party legal services, his own security guards, lawsuits filed against him, and even his first wife, who hadn't received an alimony payment in years. It just didn't make sense though. The Gerardi Keese law firm was working on hundreds of big cases. Why was there no money? The firm was representing 8,000 plaintiffs in a lawsuit against California Gas Co. over the massive Aliso Canyon gas leak in 2015, and estimated they would win a $900 million settlement. In 2016, Tom wrote an affidavit to one of his lenders, American law firm Funding, that their fees for the year would total over $110 million. So where was all this money? One lender, Law Finance Group, discovered that Tom had transferred $20 million to EJ Global LLC, which was Erika's entertainment company. Tom was also using borrowed money to pay back other loans, and to pay back client funds that he had allegedly misappropriated. The thing about Ponzi schemes though, is they always collapse. On the 3rd of November 2020, the day of the US presidential election, Erika announced that she was filing for divorce, most likely hoping the news would be buried by the election coverage. Real Housewives fans immediately began to speculate. Was Tom broke? Was the divorce a way to protect their assets? Shortly after the divorce announcement, an attorney from Chicago named Jay Edelson sued Tom and Erika Girardi for stealing settlement funds that belonged to the family of victims of the 2018 Lion Air crash in Indonesia. It was a huge tragedy. All 189 people on board died after the Boeing 737 MAX crashed just 13 minutes after takeoff. Accident investigators determined that the aircraft design flaws, inadequate training, and poor maintenance were the cause of the crash. Loved ones of the deceased hired Gerardi to take on Boeing and were grateful that this big, powerful American firm was going to fight for them. Gerardi brought in Jay Edelson as their local counsel since Boeing was based in Chicago. They agreed to split the lawyer fees 50-50. In the end, Boeing agreed to settle for $2 million to each plaintiff and transferred the money to Gerardi. But of course, Jay Edelson and the 5 families of orphans and widows he was representing never received their money. At the end of 2020, Jay sued both Tom and Erika in Chicago federal court and straight up accused them of misappropriating the settlement money to fund their, quote, outrageous lifestyles in the glitz and glam world of Hollywood and Beverly Hills. The suit also claimed, quote, that the divorce is simply a sham attempt to fraudulently protect Tom and Erika's money from those that seek to collect on debts owed by Tom and his law firm. Although this was just one of many lawsuits that were filed against the Girardis, the heinousness of this story and timing of it all captured the public's attention, and the full extent of Tom's shady past gradually came to light. A key moment was in December 2020, when the LA Times published a long-form investigative piece about the Girardis. Written by journalists Matt Hamilton and Harriet Ryan, the article went into great detail about Tom's career, including the recent lawsuits against him and allegations of misconduct. It was revealed that in September, Tom was deposed in relation to the Joseph Ruigomez case. In the deposition, he admitted to having no cash or stocks left, but it concluded with Tom agreeing to pay the Ruigomez family $12 million. But, you guessed it, he didn't pay up. The LA Times also reported that Tom had been sued over 100 times in his 40-year career and had been accused of misconduct over 50 times. There were at least 14 instances of other attorneys or expert consultants alleging that they had never been paid. In 1998, Tom's second wife had hired a forensic accountant during their divorce and discovered an undisclosed $9 million payment he had made to himself out of a client trust account. Remember the big Lockheed lawsuit from the 90s? Several clients never received their share of the $800 million settlement and filed complaints to the California State Bar. Accounting records from that case revealed that hundreds of thousands of settlement dollars had been transferred out of client trust accounts to pay for things that had nothing to do with the lawsuit, including Tom's divorce attorney and one of his private jets. There were also payments made to individuals with names that seemed made up, such as Ernest K. Citizen and John Farmer. A judge threatened to order a full audit of Tom's law offices, so he quickly reached an undisclosed settlement with the former clients. Even Tom's claim to fame, the Erin Brockovich case, wasn't actually the epic heroic tale he had made it out to be. Plaintiffs in the real case, aka residents of the town of Hinckley, were not happy with how the story was represented in the movie. In real life, Tom Girardi had told his clients that taking the case to court would take years and convinced them to go down the private arbitration route to negotiate the settlement. Private arbitration is a for-profit business run by large firms. Retired judges get paid significantly more than in the public sector to work on these cases, and the entire industry is largely unregulated. The normal rules of open courts don't apply, and there are no laws that prevent hired private judges from accepting gifts from attorneys. Tom Girardi also had close ties with at least 3 of the private judges on the case. One of them even officiated his second wedding in 1993. When the settlement was reached, Hinckley residents didn't receive their money for 6 months. And when they did, the amount was less than expected and varied greatly from person to person. For many, it wasn't enough to cover the medical fees from the serious health problems they had contracted from the contaminated water. The clients were kept in the dark about the arbitration process and were discouraged from trying to attend hearings. The entire process was shrouded in secrecy, and even today, there are no public records on the case. Following the settlement, Tom Girardi and two other lawyers who had pocketed $133 million between them chartered a yacht and treated the judges on the case to a heavily discounted Mediterranean cruise. In 2000, journalist Kathleen Sharp published a detailed account of how Hinckley residents were cheated out of their fair share of the historic settlement. It's definitely worth a read. But for the majority of his career, Tom used his power and influence to keep this kind of bad press from bubbling up to the surface of public awareness. In reality, he had a long history of unhappy clients who were missing money. Yet his record with the California State Bar was squeaky clean. The bar is the government agency responsible for regulating attorneys. They set ethics standards, administer the bar exam, hand out licenses, and discipline attorneys. Matt Hamilton and Harriet Ryan of the LA Times knew there must have been some cover-ups happening, so they sued the state bar for Tom Girardi's disciplinary records. To their shock, Tom had amassed 205 complaints against him, spanning all the way back to the 80s. And every single one of these complaints had been overlooked or quashed by generations of state bar officials. In November 2022, the State Bar of California published an open letter regarding Tom's disciplinary matters and disclosed the details of all 205 of the complaints that had been filed against him over the years. In the letter, the State Bar also admits to failing to fulfill their duty of protecting the public and pledged to make changes to their culture to prevent another Tom Girardi situation. The bar also made a total of $1.2 million in payments to 44 of Tom's victims. A third-party law firm was hired to investigate how Tom had escaped discipline for all these years. In February 2023, a comprehensive report was published about how Tom essentially bought the support and loyalty of the State Bar. He invited State Bar staffers to his opulent parties where he hired the likes of Jay Leno and Paul Anka to perform, and was close personal friends with several senior executives of the agency. He formed a particularly close relationship with a State Bar investigator named Tom Layton. It was common knowledge that the two Toms were friends, as the pair regularly met up for expensive meals around LA. The report revealed that Layton and his wife received $1 million in gifts from Tom, and they were given an American Express card paid for by the law firm to freely use on personal expenses. Tom paid the leases on the Layton's cars and let them travel in his private jets, and even provided free legal services whenever needed. Tom not only gave the Laytons two children jobs at his law firm, he was also their godfather. The report also revealed that two State Bar prosecutors were fired when they tried to advocate for disciplinary action against Tom. It was obvious that Tom was very well protected by a corrupt agency for decades, and so his law license remained spotless. It's pretty shocking how many people enabled Tom and let him get away with stealing client money for so many years. He must have felt so invincible to have the audacity to go on TV and show off his and Erika's lavish lifestyle built off of money that belonged to vulnerable people, the majority of whom were dealing with medical issues or had lost loved ones. Tom had always marketed himself as a champion for the little guy. It was true in a sense. Many of his clients were ordinary working class or middle class people who didn't have much experience with the law. But therein lies the truth about how Tom operated. He knew he could win his clients' trust with his nice old man facade. Then he'd take advantage of their lack of knowledge about legal proceedings. A common thread among many of his victims is that they were kept in the dark about their settlement money and weren't given access to statements and other records.
All I think about are victims.
I don't give a about anybody else but me.
Erika returned for season 11 of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, despite all the lawsuits she was involved in. By the time the episodes aired in mid-2021, a lot had happened. The Girardi Keys law firm was forced into bankruptcy, and 600 claims were made against them. In bankruptcy court, the extremely complex task of trying to account for every dollar that had been improperly spent was underway. A federal judge in Chicago froze the Girardis' assets and referred Tom to the US Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. His own law partner, Robert Keys, sued him, plus a string of lenders were still suing him for unpaid loans. The California State Bar finally stripped him of his law license. By July 2021, more than 100 creditors had lined up to seek stolen money from him. But the biggest bombshell was that Tom, now aged 82, had been diagnosed with late-onset Alzheimer's disease and dementia. His brother Robert was appointed as his permanent conservator. In the court filing, Robert explained that Tom's mental state had deteriorated rapidly and his short-term memory had been compromised. It was very suspicious that Tom's cognitive ability had suddenly declined, especially because he was renowned for being very sharp even in his old age. In October 2020, 1 month before the divorce announcement, Tom appeared on the Schmoozin' with Firuzen podcast. During the hour-long episode, Tom has an in-depth discussion with host Daniel Firuzen about his trial strategies. He talked about how he presents himself and how he coaches his clients to present themselves. Most importantly, he comes across as highly articulate. For years, Erika had always touted her husband as kind, supportive, intelligent, and quote, indestructible. Yet in recent seasons of her reality show, she changed the narrative and painted him as a mean, controlling man who had been declining mentally since a 2017 car accident. She also implied that he had multiple affairs. She used to mention being involved in her husband's work to fend off accusations of being a gold digger. But post-divorce, she claimed she had no idea about anything going on at the law firm. Either she was lying back when things were good, or she was lying now that things were very bad. But her words were out there for the public to dissect, and her many contradictions were widely discussed. Maybe it's irony, maybe it's karma. But Erika's desire for fame, inviting reality TV cameras into her home, making a small fortune off her memoir, doing countless podcasts and interviews, it became the catalyst for her and Tom's undoing. In November 2022, Christopher Kamen, the former CFO of Gerardi, was arrested by LA prosecutors on wire fraud charges. He was accused of embezzling over $10 million from firm bank accounts to pay for a mansion in the Bahamas, plus expensive gifts and a $20,000 monthly stipend for an escort. It was believed that Kamen, who was not a lawyer, was running his own fraud scheme, separate from the skimming of client money. In February 2023, federal grand juries in Los Angeles and Chicago indicted Tom Girardi for stealing over $18 million from clients. In LA, Tom and Chris Kamen were charged with 5 counts of wire fraud for the alleged embezzlement of over $15 million from several clients. In Chicago, Tom, along with his son-in-law David Lira and Chris Kamen, were all charged with 8 counts of wire fraud and 4 counts of criminal contempt in court in relation to the alleged misappropriation of $3 million in settlement funds intended for the orphans and widows of those killed in the 2018 Lion Air crash. All 3 men pleaded not guilty. Each count of wire fraud is punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison. Tom was now living in a restricted memory care unit within an assisted living facility. He had been photographed looking very frail and wearing shabby, ill-fitting clothes. His team claimed that his cognitive state was declining, and so a series of mental competency hearings had to be held to determine whether he was fit to appear before a jury. Witnesses from the assisted living facility testified that Tom seemed to think he was still running his law firm and would spend hours scribbling gibberish on legal pads. Prosecutors and victims accused him of exaggerating and even faking his illness to avoid punishment for his crimes. However, evidence from his brain scans, medical tests, anecdotal accounts, and clinical interviews led US District Judge Josephine Staten to rule that Tom Girardi was, quote, able to understand the nature and consequences of the proceedings against him and to assist properly in his defense. In other words, he was competent to stand trial. Tom Girardi will face court in mid-2024. Meanwhile, the bankruptcy case is still ongoing. The Ruigomez family were one of the first victims to receive the money owed to them, but sadly, it is unlikely that all of Tom's former clients will get paid. As of this video's upload, Erika Jayne is still a part of the cast of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She recently completed a Las Vegas residency of her show, Bet It All on Blonde, where tickets sold for as little as $7. I live stream most days at twitch.tv/leadelbow if you want to come and have a chat. Thanks for watching.